Hello, I'm your superhero critic. I'll stay super as long as you stay awesome. And guess what? It's Friday the 13th, so you know what that means.
More comics about murder?
Yes! This is Friday the 13th, Badlands.
Badlands is a Friday the 13th two-issue miniseries released in 2008, written by Ron Mars, illustrated by Mike Huddleston, and published by Wildstorm Comics. The comic tries to give a reason on why Crystal Lake is so important to the franchise by giving us a past story look into how it was not only Jason to go psychotic by being around the lake, but multiple people.
We open on a group of figures advancing through the snowy wilderness, revealed to be a group of trappers of apparently questionable morals, as Ben in particular shows no qualms breaking into someone's home uninvited and unwanted, threatening the native woman inside and making it clear he'll kill her if she objects to her house guests.
I understand that it's a survival situation, but come on!
There is really no reason to be a douche.
Or a douche canoe.
That too.
Swimming away.
In the sea of your douchiness.
I need to clean it.
Go to bed.
Get a douche bag.
Go to bed.
Okay. We then come to the present day where a trio of hikers find themselves at a cottage at a same location, and they break in for the shelter in order to get themselves out of the blizzard. While the trio gets settled in, Diane makes the group a fire, and they all bicker back and forth about staying in the cabin. We then can sense that there is a tension between Diane and Phil, but it's not shown why yet, as the two just bicker back and forth.
As we cut back to the past, we see the uninvited guests helping themselves to the woman's food as she sits off to the side in terror, likely having heard stories of dangerous white settlers and perfectly aware of what's probably going to happen to her given the historical context. Well, not so lucky for her, but something tells me you don't give me a shit about her point of view. And dude, she's probably not talking because she probably doesn't speak English, not because she's plotting your murder. Can we chill with the casual racism for like 5 seconds here?
MAGA!
On the next page, Ben is starting to act concerningly creepy, even more so than before. He calls the woman a godless savage and very casually talks about raping her because he's bored and she, quote, ain't half bad looking. Ethan very reasonably tries to talk him out of it, as he seems to be the only one of the men with a functioning conscience, but Ben threatens him into submission before making more disgusting remarks about the woman. I have no words. Out of all the unpleasant people that we've ever seen in a Friday the 13th comic, ew. Just, ew. Can we please get the murderer now?
Two things. One, no, we can't because Jason's not the main character in his own franchise. And two, for someone who says they have no words, that was a lot.
Ben starts in on the disgusting act by calming the woman and ripping her infant out of her arms, passing him off to Joseph, whose main issue, other than, the horrible morality of his companion, seems to be that he's concerned that Ben will tire her out and he won't get a turn. The woman understandably tries to fight back against the assault, only for Ben to force her to the ground and yell for Joseph to drop the baby and help him hold her. Ethan shows enough conscience to keep the baby relatively safe, but not enough to actually stop his companions from being horrible, shitty people. At this point, I feel like Jason showing up and doing the stabby thing wouldn't be murder, it would just be justified karma.
You get a stabbing, and you get a stabbing! We all get a stabbing!
At least the racist rapists do. Try saying that 5 times fast.
That 5 times fast?
Go fuck yourself.
In the present, Jeremy sneaks into bed with Diane, alluding to her and Phil being a couple and Jeremy being Diane's affair, with Jeremy seducing her into having sex while Phil is sleeping. But as Diane rides her forbidden lover, she notices Jason standing outside the window. Why does Jason just have to start being a creeper out of nowhere? He's just like, I'm watching you fornicate.
Isn't that his entire MO, though? He watches you fuck and then he kills you?
You got stabbed with a penis, let me stab you with something else! But due to Diane's scream over Jason, Phil is woken up and the affair is brought to the open, causing a huge argument between the trio. Phil and Jeremy try to tell her no one's out there, but you can tell Phil is pissed off.
Why do Friday the 13th comics always have the most despicable people?
Because if you cared about the character, they would have to be the survivor.
And then I wouldn't feel so happy seeing their brains splattered all over the pavement.
Yay! Death.
We come back to the men as they've finished their assault, and Ben is relaxing with a pipe. Ethan calls him out, asking how he could smoke at a time like that, and Ben insults him for not being man enough to either take part or stop him. Alright, I agree with the second part of your criticism. The woman reaches for something in a bag, and Joseph yells for her to stop, ignoring the fact that she probably doesn't speak English and can't understand a word he's saying, and has probably stopped trying to understand. Panicked, Joseph shoots her, killing both her and the infant. Ethan calls him out for the heartless crime as Joseph tries to defend himself, saying she was trying to attack them. Ethan screams at him because he just shot a woman who was only reaching for a rattle to distract her probably traumatized baby, and the men finally start to realize they've maybe fucked up. Just now. Just now is when you realize you probably fucked up. You morons deserve to die at this point, and that includes you, Ethan, for not stopping any of it. It was your job as the one with a functioning conscience to either keep them in check or die trying.
I have nothing more to add to that one.
A man, presumably the woman's husband and father of their now dead infant, walks into the shelter and is understandably alarmed and aghast at what he sees in front of him. He jumps toward Ethan, clearly intent on murder, and who could blame him at this point, only to be shot by Ben, who then acts like attempting to kill yet another innocent was somehow a favor to anyone. But the man, though wounded, survives the shot and runs out the door. The men go to follow him so that they can finish him off. Because you simply can't have witnesses to the laundry list of atrocities you've just committed, can you?
Issue 1 ends in both the past and the present with the men coming to the end of the blood trail and our love triangle both asking what to do now, as before the last page shows the Native American man with has his face violently ripped off from the gunshot. He's somehow still alive and apparently planning his revenge, holding an axe and juxtaposed with our favorite machete-wielding maniac in the very last panel.
So are we finally going to see some Jason murdering fun in the second issue?
Not really. Issue 2 starts with Phil and one of the men in the past staring into the fire before Diane wants to talk things out with Phil, but he wants nothing to do with her, instead just wants to make his way into the blizzard and head away from the cheaters. Jeremy and Diane both beg him not to head out and to stay until the blizzard's gone, but he tells them to fuck off and heads out anyway. Diane then begs Jeremy to go after Phil, which he does, but instead of finding Phil, Jeremy just finds Jason, who quickly responds by cutting off Jeremy's head. That is not the type of head that Jeremy was expecting today. What, you have nothing to add?
For once, no. I feel like you summed it up there. Joseph is continuing to freak out that this is a bad place, as Ben tries to reason with him that they can't leave until the storm is over. Ethan points out that in addition to the storm, the husband of the woman they killed is still out there. Ben is convinced that the man is dead and passes off that danger as non-existent. But no one's reasoning is getting through to Joseph as he screams once more about a bad place and how bad things will happen if they stay there, and runs out the door into the storm. That panic attack you're having, that's your tiny little underused conscience beginning to function. Ethan is once again proving he's the only one with a working moral compass as he insists on going after Joseph to save him, knowing he'll die in the storm. Ben, who of course couldn't give less of a shit, doesn't want to go. Ethan threatens him, and Ben points out that Ethan won't actually do anything to him, and that Ethan needs Ben's protection from the angry husband. And Ethan realizes the truth of this and storms off angrily, wishing Ben would die. Ethan's wish, and mine, comes true pretty quickly, as no sooner is Ethan out the door than an axe comes swinging through the leather walls of the shelter, and Ben is dragged out into the snow by his hair. He ends up getting a skull split open and lying in a pool of blood in the snow. I have never felt so satisfied by a death in a comic book. This is great.
Phil comes back to the cottage and tells Diane about Jeremy's death, and at first she seems to think he's bullshitting her, but eventually she believes him. Phil begins to try to make a blockade for them, but in the process, Phil is skewed in the skull and killed with a ski pole. Diane then tries to shut Jason out, but he overpowers her by knocking her to the ground.
Ethan is seen wandering through the woods looking for Joseph, and he does manage to find him, impaled on a tree branch. Hey look, it's a karma kebab!
It needs barbecue sauce.
That's what the blood is.
You!
Ethan assumes that Joseph is dead, only to be scared shitless when Joseph lurches forward and gasps out his last words, telling him, "It wasn't us. It was this place. Something wrong with this place." And Ethan is scared shitless yet again as he turns to be faced with the angry husband wielding the axe. Ethan gets slashed across the face and attempts to fight back, but at this point, whatever curse may be in the land is determined to keep the husband alive while he exacts his well-deserved revenge, so it's no use. Ethan is sent tumbling to the ground, and as he lies in a pool of blood, he realizes he's as good as dead, and he offers a last, far too late apology before getting his skull crushed by a large rock. Alright, Ethan probably deserved to die the least out of all three, but he still did nothing to help the woman and her child, so his death is accordingly still gruesome, but probably the least painful out of the three.
I mean, it was still painful.
Yeah, but when your brain's crushed by a rock, it's over pretty quick.
Diane grabs the ski pole out of her dead boyfriend to try to defend herself, stabbing Jason and running off into the blizzard. Jason gets back up and gives chase when Diane makes the stupidest mistake she could make in a horror comic.
Being blonde?
No.
Being a woman?
No.
What then?
She tripped on a rock.
Yeah, that'll do it.
This, of course, ends with Jason catching up to Diane, who begs and pleads for her life, but this is Jason, so she just meets a machete, and our comic ends with another split panel of Jason dragging a headless Diane into the lake, while the Native American man gives his wife a proper burial underwater, with an ending of our two killers in an underwater shot.
Historical accuracy than we would like to admit for this comic. I mean, the historical part is great, but it could have been its own part instead of being an adjacent comic.
However, that being said, this comic still sucks. I love the Friday the 13th comics, but out of all the ones we've reviewed so far, I like this one the least. And it's mainly because Jason is not even the main character of his own comic. And while that's normal for the type of franchise it is, where the survivor is usually the main character, in this, no one survives. So what was the point of this fucking comic? Other than to suggest that maybe the lake is what caused Jason to go psychotic and that not himself. But that being said, next week we're going to look at some more superhero commercials, because I should have been doing it back in January, but ended up not getting around to the episode. So we're going to get back to what I was going to do and try to get back on schedule. That being said, I'm your superhero critic, and I'll stay super as long as you stay awesome.